folks, Captain Blade J52 here with a video discussing some of the stuff with the new upcoming Space Engineers 2 that's on the horizon, as well as a controversial decision that could severely impact the popularity of the game, as well as its modding community. So first, very briefly at the time of recording this, Space Engineers 2 is set to hit early access on January the 27th. And this first bit of early access will be mainly the creative mode and some core bits of the game like the building. There's not going to be any multiplayer yet, or ability to share your blueprints like you might have in Space Engineers 1. Now, in their Vertical Slice 1.1, they'll be releasing the in-game workshop, which is tied exclusively to mod.io and does not support Steam. And then later in Slice 1.5, they'll be giving various tools to modders to mod the game, with some of these tools potentially being some of the ones they will be using to create the game themselves. Now, again, all of this means, of course, no Steam Workshop support is planned at the time of filming this. Now, I've seen some people wondering why that's a big deal, aside from their preferences for the Steam platform. You know, they may be saying, well, it's just a different platform, what's the issue? Well, I'm going to demonstrate why this is an issue for modders such as myself and several others, and why it will negatively impact Space Engineers 2, or Space Engineer 2's popularity, and could drastically reduce the number of modders in the community should this decision not be reversed. Now, Keen Software House says they want to do this, in part in order to make it a one-stop place for console and PC players both, and not have a divide in the community. Now, while I can understand not wanting a divide, the problem is that this doesn't fix the issue at all. All it does is potentially make it worse, and at best it just shifts the divide to a different location without actually fixing it. Now, one of the chief reasons it won't fix the issue of a potential divide in the community is because consoles natively cannot run scripts. And if any mod uses a script, it does not matter how tiny, the console players won't be able to use it, even if they get it from mod.io. Now, while mod.io might allow them to access some things, if various authors bring it over from Steam, it doesn't grant access to mods with scripts, so there is still a divide, it's just in a different location. They may be able to download said mod with a script, but they won't be able to run it. So, again, just a different location. Now, in my case here, I'm going to show you really quick, these are the two pages for one of my mods currently. You can see here I have a respectable amount of subs on Steam, and I have a decent amount of subs over on mod.io. So currently I am maintaining two different versions of the mod. Now, one of the reasons I'm doing this is because there is a fair amount of people that I could potentially pick up subs from over on mod.io, so there is a little bit of potential with the platform. I'm not going to sit here and say that there isn't. The problem is that for a lot of modders, they don't want to essentially have two versions of the mod or maintain it on two different places, which I can't say that I blame them. Also, my apologies if that air conditioner is really loud. Again, tiny little room I'm recording in, and it gets really hot in here without it. But anyway, that being said, you can see that I've got a decent amount of subs here. Now, one of the big things I had to do when I came to mod.io is I essentially had to split a script out of my mod and have it as its own separate upload here on Mod.io for people that wanted to use it. Now, let me go ahead and move this picture over here because it is going to be related. So let's move this over. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a debug draw thing that's in the game currently, and it's related to some of the ship tools that I've created as part of my mod, specifically welders with a larger range, much larger range in fact in some instances, than purely the vanilla ones. And this is to make it easier to weld and so on and so forth without having to get, super close or be as precise as I otherwise would have to be. Now you can see here for this red circle, that is a pretty massive range for a welder. And then we'll see its little brother here has this bit of a range here. So they're a lot bigger than the standard ranges, which makes it easier to weld stuff up. Now, to kind of counteract some potential downsides to this one especially having such a gigantic range, is one of the other modders let me essentially copy paste one of their tool damage disable scripts and throw it into the mod so that people don't damage themselves, weld themselves, or so on, accidentally using these tools. And on Steam, I have this natively baked into the mod. All you have to do is download it, slap it in your game, your server, whatever you're trying to do, and just go for it. That's all you got to do. Now on Mod.io, since there's potentially console players over there, I can't really do that. I mean, I could, but then the console players couldn't use it. And that's, potential lost subs and so on and so forth. So, the only solution I had, if I wanted to put it on Mod.io, and if I wanted the console players to potentially be able to download it and use it, is I had to split the script off, have it as its own little minor upload on Mod.io. Now, as another part of this, I also gave console players an exclusive model to warn them ahead of time as to how massive of a welding range or a sensor range, whatever you want to call it, that this welder has. Again, anything in this red here is potentially going to get welded. So, some people might be thinking, well, Captain Blade, what's the big deal? It seems like you've already got it sorted. Well, the big deal is this going forward, is let's say, for example, I wanted to port this mod over to Space Engineers 2. And let's say everything's able to come over, just to keep it simple, as a one-to-one translation to what we have now. This means that if I want people to be able to use this mod for Space Engineers 2, I've got to make a choice at this juncture. I can leave the script in the mod, like I have for the Steam variant, and then essentially alienate all of my console subscribers, or I can take the mod out and potentially gimp the tools, essentially, and them not be as good as they otherwise could be, because one of the things that I made them for was to give greater welding ranges while also not damaging players, which is a big deal with using ship tools sometimes, is if you're not careful, you can damage yourself or your teammates. Now, the other third option I could potentially have is, if I went forward with it for Space Engineers 2, then I can have the one variant that doesn't have the script baked in, and then have a variant that does have it baked in, all on the same platform. Now, people may say, well, why not just do that? Well, the problem with that there is potentially people downloading the wrong variant, and wondering, hey, why doesn't this work? You know, what's going on? And it just creates unnecessary headaches. Now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down here, and let's see if it did it here. Okay, so it didn't actually, I think I've got it fixed for this particular mod. But one of the other things that is really annoying sometimes with mod.io is some of the piddly little restrictions that they have on certain words and things that you can put in your own mod description. Such as, in a couple of instances, it's actually censored the word ammo when describing something that I created for a weapon. Which is wholly weird to me, that you would censor the word ammo with a game that has weapons and things of that nature to it. You would think that they wouldn't do that, but sometimes they do. Then, in a couple of other instances, they may censor a word as simple as camera. So if somebody has a camera mod for Space Engineers, then they might censor that. And you never know from one minute to the next what it's going to do. Now, another problem with mod.io is that it's often not always as stable as something like Steam is. And that's a very big deal, because in some instances, I have gone up to a week at a time not being able to access my own mods on mod.io because of whatever reason they're having with their website. And if, say, heaven forbid, something happens with my mod that I need to update it, then there's no way I'm going to be able to do it if I can't access the mod. If I can't get on here and I can't access the platform, well, how am I supposed to put a fix out if, say, these 10 guys over here are having an issue and they've downloaded it through mod.io, but I can't get to it? So that's a very big deal. Now, there's some other odds and ends with it that I could get into that's kind of nitpicky, but I'll leave that for some of the other modders to get into. But I wanted to make this really quickly to just kind of illustrate the issue from the perspective of a modder. It's not that I don't want change. It's that if they're going to change it, there needs to be... It needs to be a good change, basically. It needs to be a good change, and it needs to make sense in order for me to want to continue modding. Now, me personally, I'm probably going to keep carrying on with what I'm doing, but there's a lot more modders that simply won't, because they don't want to port their stuff over to mod.io because of how much of a pain in the butt it can be. Now, another reason this is a big issue is it's also going to intensify the divide between console players even more, based on the script issue. Now, a very popular mod type that a lot of people like to use is energy shields. Now, despite what people may think about, should they be put into the vanilla game, should they not be, sort of divide, I would hope a lot of people would at least be willing to acknowledge that they are one of the more popular mod types. Well, the problem in this instance is if, say, Scython, who was, to my knowledge, the first person to create an energy shield mod for Space Engineers, wanted to port his stuff over to mod.io, anybody downloading it on mod.io would pretty much either have to be a PC player, or they would have to have one of their friends with a PC host it, assuming they wanted to play it on console. And it just creates this all ridiculous rigmarole that just really shouldn't be a thing. And that's not because somebody like, say, Scython or anybody else that has a shield mod doesn't want people to be able to use the mods. It's because there's a fairly hefty amount of scripting that goes on behind the scenes to tell the game, okay, this is a shield, this is what happens when it gets hit, this is how much health to take off, this is when it regenerates, this is how fast it regenerates, and so on and so forth. So, by sticking it exclusively to mod.io, you're essentially guaranteeing that there are whole classes of mod that console players, and a lot of people in general, simply would not have access to. And you're just creating an even more apparent artificial divide in the community. Now, me personally, I've been able to maintain the two versions of my mod fairly easily between Steam and mod.io because, again, it is two separate platforms. If I was forced to go with just mod.io, I don't know that I would do that. I don't know that I would maintain the two separate versions, which again means that choice that I mentioned before of I'm either going to have to, decide, okay, do I want to go with the non-scripted version and then have the script over here on the side, potentially, yes, getting more subs, but making it potentially more dangerous to use some of the modded tools? Do I want to go with the scripted variant, which would potentially isolate some subscribers I have now and potential future ones? Or do I want to try to maintain two separate versions on the same platform and risk people downloading the wrong one and having issues there? So, it's not a good choice I would have to make either way. And I'm far from the most prolific modder in the Space Engineers community currently. But even I'm potentially facing choices like this. And there are modders that have far, far more subs than I do that would have to make similar decisions. Do they want to port their stuff over and deal with issues like that? Do they want to potentially have two different versions? What do they want to do? So the simplest way to do this would be for Keen to just do what they're doing now with Space Engineers 1. Have Steam Workshop support, have mod.io support, and then let people download it from wherever the heck they want to get it from. Because no matter which way you go, you're not going to please everybody. There's always going to be some mods that are going to be Steam Workshop exclusive, just because certain authors don't want to bring their stuff over to mod.io, nor should they have to just to maintain their sub numbers or so on. And despite the tone I may be taking, I'm not accusing Keen of doing this maliciously or anything of the such. I don't think anybody is. I think this is a decision that just hasn't been thought out as well as it really should be. And I really, really hope that Keen will reverse course on this and they'll reconsider this and they'll have Steam Workshop support and then just let people download it where they want to. And, kind of go from there. But anyways, folks, I wanted to just kind of showcase this really quickly, give you all some perspective from that of a modder like myself. If anybody else wants to chime in and talk about it, that may also be a modder or that's covering the stuff, by all means, feel free to do so. I know there's other videos out there that have covered this stuff already. There's a really good one by another YouTuber known as Captain Jack that goes into far greater detail on other stuff than I have here. I would encourage you folks to check him out. He's a cool dude. But anyways, folks, what do you all think about all this? Is this some of the stuff that I laid out for you guys? Is this something you had considered? Is this something you didn't know about? Did you know about it? What do you all think on this? But regardless, let Keen Software House know your thoughts about it one way or another. I personally am pulling for them to use the Steam Workshop and just go with what they've got. I think it's going to be very detrimental to their game if they don't. But anyways, folks, for now, this is Captain Blade, J52, signing off.